My name is James Holloway, and for the past 20 years, I have served as a ranger in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. If you've ever ventured into these ancient woods, you know there's something different about them, something old and watching. What I've seen out here, what I've heard and felt, is the reason I'm writing this now. If I disappear, if they finally get me, at least the truth will be out there. Most cases get swept under the rug, explained away as accidents, wild animal attacks, or getting lost. But I know better. There's a pattern. Seasoned hikers with years of experience vanish without a trace. No blood, no signs of struggle. Their campsites remain untouched, backpacks neatly zipped, even fires still smoldering. I've been called to investigate sites like these too many times to count, and every time I leave with the same sinking feeling in my gut. There was one case that still haunts me. A couple, David and Linda Pritchard, who vanished from their tent near Devil's Hollow. I found their campsite, their belongings undisturbed. Even their shoes were still outside the tent. No sign of a struggle, no footprints leading away. Just gone. But the worst part? Deep in the trees surrounding their site, I found strange symbols carved into the bark, jagged, unnatural, and nothing like any language I've seen. They looked almost like warnings. Then there was the case of a group of scouts, 7 kids and 2 troop leaders. They were experienced, well prepared, but when they didn't check in, we sent out a search party. What we found still chills me. Their tents were slashed open from the inside, but there was no blood, no bodies, just deep, clawed gashes in the trees surrounding their site. And the most unsettling part? Every single compass and GPS unit in their camp had been smashed, as if something wanted to make sure they stayed lost. Fog in the Appalachians isn't unusual, but there's something about the mist in these woods that's different. It moves against the wind, thick and deliberate. And sometimes, if you stare too long, you see things in it. I was patrolling near Raven's Pass when I first saw the figure. Tall, gaunt, standing motionless among the trees, just beyond the reach of my flashlight. I called out, thinking it was a lost hiker. No response. I stepped closer, and it didn't move. That was when I noticed something was wrong. Its arms were too long, its head tilted unnaturally, like it was listening. The second I raised my radio to call it in, it disappeared into the fog. Not ran, not stepped away, just vanished. Other rangers have reported similar figures. One guy, a veteran named Carter, swore up and down he saw something with glowing eyes in the mist, watching him from the tree line. When he approached, it retreated into the fog, but no matter how far he chased, it never made a sound. He only stopped when he realized he had wandered miles from the trail, as if it had lured him deeper on purpose. The off-limits cave and the government trucks. There's an area deep in the mountains, an old cave that's been sealed off for decades. Officially, it's off-limits due to unstable rock formations, but I've always suspected there's another reason. Late at night, I've seen unmarked government trucks rolling up to that cave, their beds loaded with massive amounts of raw meat, cow carcasses, deer, sometimes even what looked like whole pigs. No one ever explained why. They would drop the meat at the cave's entrance, never going inside, then leave as fast as they came. Sometimes I'd hear something after they were gone, deep, guttural growls, followed by a wet, tearing sound. Whatever lived in that cave wasn't something they wanted people knowing about. Once, I tried to get closer after the trucks left. As I neared the cave, an unbearable stench hit me, rotting flesh mixed with something older. The sound of something massive shifting in the dark made my skin crawl. I turned and left before I could see what was inside. When I brought it up to my superiors, they shrugged it off, told me to mind my own business. But after that conversation, I noticed something strange. Reports and paperwork related to that area started disappearing from our records. It was like they were erasing any trace of that cave's existence. The mimicked voices. It started with the voices. It was early autumn, the air crisp and cool, when I heard myself calling for help. I was patrolling a remote trail near Black Hollow Ridge when the sound came from somewhere deep in the trees to my left. My own voice, stretched, warped, but undeniably mine. Help me. I stopped dead in my tracks, my breath catching in my throat. The voice wasn't echoing from the direction of my radio. It was out in the woods, among the trees, coming from a place no human should have been. I raised my flashlight and scanned the dense brush, but all I saw were gnarled branches and shifting shadows. Then the voice called again. Help me. Please. I felt ice crawl up my spine. It was off. The way the words were drawn out, too slow, like something unfamiliar with human speech was trying to sound like me. I stepped forward, my boots crunching against fallen leaves, my hand gripping my pistol. But as soon as my light cut through the darkness, silence. No wind, no insects, not even the distant hoot of an owl. Just dead, suffocating silence. Then a branch snapped behind me. I spun around, flashlight trembling, but there was nothing, just the empty trail. I don't remember how long I stood there, but I do remember backing away, forcing myself not to run, and getting the hell out of there. I reported it later, but my supervisor just chuckled. Might have been a bobcat, he said. They make some weird sounds. But it wasn't a bobcat. I knew what I heard, and worse. A week later, a hiker went missing on that same trail. The fire tower incident. The fire tower at Ridge Point had been abandoned for years, but one night, I had no choice but to take shelter in it. A sudden storm had rolled in, and I was too far from the station to make it back safely. At first, it was peaceful, just the sound of rain drumming against the roof. But then, sometime around midnight, I heard it. Scratching. Long, slow scrapes against the wooden walls outside. I grabbed my rifle and stood up, heart pounding. The scratching circled the tower, moving around the base, then climbing up the steps. I aimed my rifle at the door, sweat dripping down my neck. The scratching got louder, heavier. Something with claws, big ones, was outside. I shouted. Whatever it was stopped. For a long, agonizing minute, there was only the sound of rain. Then, a heavy impact against the door. Then another. The wood groaned under the pressure, and I swore I saw the hinges shake. I fired through the door. Silence. The storm howled, but whatever had been outside was gone. Come morning, I found the deep claw marks in the wood, 2 inches deep. I never stayed in that tower again. The wrong deer. It was late one evening when I saw it. A deer. But wrong. At first glance, it looked normal. Just standing there at the tree line, half hidden behind the underbrush. But when I looked closer, I noticed its legs were bent in too many places, its joints moving unnaturally. And it was staring at me. Not grazing. Not alert like a normal deer. Just standing there, watching. I blinked. It had moved closer. I hadn't seen it step forward. It was just suddenly 10 feet nearer. I took a step back. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to stay still. The deer twitched, its head tilted too far, almost upside down. Then, it took a step, but it wasn't walking. It was like it had been yanked forward. No transition, just suddenly closer. That was enough for me. I backed away, gun raised, not looking away until I was safely back in my truck. When I looked again, the deer was gone. The underground tunnel. Deep in the woods, there's an old abandoned cabin. No one knows who built it, but it's been empty for as long as any ranger can remember. One afternoon, I decided to check it out. The inside was nothing special. Rotten furniture, broken glass, years of neglect. But in the far corner of the room, beneath a half-rotted rug, I found something. A hatch. It was rusted shut, but with enough effort, I pried it open. A dark hole yawned beneath me, a wooden ladder leading down into blackness. I climbed down. The air was damp and rank, thick with the scent of decay. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a tunnel that stretched further than my light could reach. Then I saw them. Bones, scattered along the walls, half buried in the dirt. Some were small, animals maybe, but others were human. I turned and climbed back up that ladder so fast I nearly fell. When I reported it, a team was sent out. But when they came back, they told me there was nothing there. No tunnel, no bones, just an empty cabin. I never went back. The old ranger's warning. I wasn't the only one who saw things out there. One of the older rangers, a man named Bill, had been working these mountains long before me. One evening, as we sat around the station, he pulled me aside. "They don't want us here," he whispered. "Who?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not who. What?" He told me to leave, said I had time to get out before it was too late. The next morning, he handed in his resignation. A week later, he vanished. No one could find him. His car was still at home, his wallet untouched. It was like he had simply walked into the woods and never came out. Or maybe something took him. But the worst thing is yet to be told. This was the thing that made me quit for good. I was on a routine patrol near an abandoned logging road when I felt it. The air changed, thicker, heavier. The usual sounds of the forest faded away. No birds, no wind, just silence. I've been in these woods long enough to know when something was watching me, and I knew I wasn't alone. Then I saw it. At first it looked like a bear, massive and hunched, moving between the trees. But when it stepped into the moonlight, I realized this was no bear. It was taller, easily 8 feet, covered in matted dark fur that seemed to shift as if it was alive. Its limbs were unnaturally long, its fingers ending in curved black talons. But its face, dear God, its face. It had too many eyes, glossy and black like a spider's, blinking out of sync. Its mouth stretched too wide, filled with jagged teeth that dripped with something thick and dark. Then it moved. Fast. Too fast. It lunged at me with a guttural roar, and I barely had time to raise my rifle. I fired, but the bullets did nothing. It kept coming, its movements unnatural, jerky, like it was learning how to use its body. I ran. I don't know how long I sprinted through the trees, branches whipping against my face, lungs burning. But it was right behind me. I could hear it breathing, rasping, wet, hungry. I tripped. My body hit the ground hard, and I rolled onto my back just in time to see it looming over me, its too many eyes glistening in the darkness. It let out a noise, a mix between a growl and a clicking sound, and reached down, its talons mere inches from my throat. Then, something changed. A low, droning hum filled the air. The creature recoiled, its head snapping toward the trees. It let out a deep, guttural screech and backed away before vanishing into the dark. I lay there, gasping, too terrified to move. The next morning I packed my things. I handed in my resignation and I left. Some things aren't meant to be understood. Some things aren't meant to be survived. I have many more stories, too many to tell in one sitting. The things in these mountains are real. The missing hikers, they didn't just wander off. The figures in the fog, they're watching. The voices in the night, don't answer them. The government, they know. They've known for a long time. If you ever find yourself in the Appalachian wilderness and the woods go quiet, if you feel eyes on you but see nothing, leave. Walk back the way you came. Don't run. Don't listen to the voices. And whatever you do, don't look into the fog too long.